I got a VR headset.
That's right, a VR headset. I've been playing a lot of VR games instead of, working on videos, going outside, or upholding a social life. Instead of doing all those things, I've been walking around the virtual world with a flight recorder taped to my face. So I've compiled a fair amount of experience in the virtual reality. So I thought, why not make lemonade and do a video documenting my experiences in VR. This is going to be a non-canon video, and I want to do non-canon videos more often because the canon videos take a lot of time to produce. I don't really want to leave it so long between uploads. Anyway, let's start with a VR game that's technically a mod, but is still a very, very good VR experience.
Yes, Half-Life 2 has a VR mod, and honestly, the level of quality in this free-to-play mod is legitimately better than some other VR games that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Mods for non-VR games that translate them into VR tend to be a little bit hit or miss. They can either be really good, think of something like Vivecraft, or they can be a little bit dodgy, think the Gmod VR add-on. The developers have done an incredible job porting the game over to VR. All the weapons feel great, and of course, it's Half-Life 2, the greatest first-person shooter ever made. The story is completely intact, but now you can kiss Barney and Kleiner. Trust me, I know that you lot want to. The gunplay in Half-Life 2 VR is pretty good for the most part. There are a couple of issues here and there. So unlike Half-Life Alyx, Half-Life 2 VR has two-handed weapons, meaning that you need to manually cock the shotgun, manually pull back slides on certain weapons, like most other VR shooters. But the thing is that sometimes when I go to grab a bit of the gun so I can, aim the thing better, I'll sometimes miss completely and end up one-handing the weapon, which increases the recoil by quite a bit, causing me to miss half the magazine. This isn't too much of an issue, as for me personally, I adapt to two-handed weapons quite quickly in VR. I had a similar thing with Boneworks where I would go through a spell of one-handing assault rifles because I couldn't grab the barrel correctly, but as soon as I kind of reprogrammed my brain, it all worked out perfectly fine. I'm not really sure why some people complain about two-handed weapons in VR games. I think they're quite immersive personally, but hey, that's just me. You play as theoretical physicist Gordon Freeman, who I'm 90% sure is the living manifestation of Jesus. I mean, he can survive near fatal amounts of radiation without getting tumours, absorb more bullets than your average Texan, and can bludgeon people to death with a crowbar like it's nothing. Gordon must use his achingly diverse arsenal of weapons and toned biceps to shoot his way through the ranks of the Combine, a race of aliens that took over the entirety of Earth in 7 hours, and who are now currently drinking the Earth's resources dry, oppressing the people's rights, and beating and torturing civilians that they deem as anti-citizens. Sound familiar at all? This is honestly an amazing way to play the game. If you're like me and you've played through Half-Life 2 more times than you care to remember, then this will be a great way to re-experience this old classic. It works great on the Quest 3 and is a staggeringly well-optimized game. Optimization with VR games tends to be a little bit hit or miss, but this certainly hits. But and it's a big but, there are a few issues here and there that mainly stem from the fact this is a VR port running on a 20-year-old engine. I've heard issues surrounding the Valve indexed knuckle controllers where brushing them slightly will cause you to pick random stuff up from the environment, but I'm on a Quest 3 so that doesn't really apply to me, tee-hee-hee. The mod also doesn't upscale the textures, at all, so I would highly recommend replacing the texture with higher res ones, because as much as I love Half-Life 2, I will admit some of the textures look like the texture artist threw dirt at a wall, took a picture of it and said fuck it, that'll do. I've also heard some complaints about the ladders, but I didn't really have much of an issue climbing them, so perhaps the team made them a little bit less buggered. I don't know what it is with Source Engine games and just not being able to do ladders correctly. Another thing is that if you're prone to motion sickness from VR, then you're going to really hate the driving section. There are accessibility settings in the options that will allow you to tone down certain effects to make the driving sections a little bit more bearable. The game actually warns you when you turn off the comfort settings that you're going to need strong VR legs if you're going to do the driving sections.
Whilst we're talking about Half-Life, I want to briefly touch on the VR mod for Half-Life 1.
I don't really like this mod. Not only are the ladders extremely dodgy, but the game just doesn't function well in VR. Yes, I know Gold Source will be 30 soon, but this mod is really rough. Not only does climbing ladders trigger the flashlight, but for some reason the mod has a tendency to play music from your computer's music folder instead of the game's normal soundtrack. Because after the Resonance Cascade occurred, Tree Fingers by Radiohead started playing, and as much as I adore Kid A, it didn't really fit with what was going on in the game. Editing Bison here. So, whilst I was recording footage of the Half-Life 1 VR mod, the exact bug that I just described actually happened, so I thought I would show you it in its entirety. I did not edit this. This is the unedited footage that I captured for this segment. Enjoy. I get that the mod was made by one guy, but it needs a lot more time in the oven. The rest of the game is fine, the gunplay is alright, aside from the fact that you can't reload, wait what? But developer, if you're watching this, for the love of God, just fix the ladders, please. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Beat Saber, a game that often starts like, oh yeah, this is pretty chill, I think I could probably get into this. Then evolves into, okay, it's getting a little bit harder, but still definitely manageable. And eventually devolves into, merciful God in heaven! Whilst you look like a total idiot because you're a freak in public waving your arms around. You have a red and a blue lightsaber and must cut the corresponding block colour with the corresponding saber colour. Sounds simple. Well, that's because it is. The real difficulty of Beat Saber comes from the level, which there is a dizzying amount of. Excluding all the paid DLCs, you get 7 volumes of songs, each containing 4 to 6 tracks, and a small little playlist that has 4 remixes in it. Each level has this little symbol right here, which I think is the amount of cubes that fly towards your Gormler's face per second. Of course, a level that has a relatively low cubes per second rate will be quite chill, whereas something with high cubes per second will be... yeah. That. As well as the 7 volumes that come with the base game, there's also a bunch of paid DLC you get from a lot of different popular artists. Metallica, Green Day, Linkin Park, BTS, Skrillex, and a few others that I don't care enough to list. Some of my favourite tracks include, in no particular order, I Want to Be a Machine, The Master, Drum and Bass, Spin Eternally, and $100 bills. All of these songs are complete bangers, and they always succeed in making me scream something along the lines of, oh my god, what the bloody hell is wrong with my tracking? Whilst also making my arms and wrists ache like I just did a very sus activity that YouTube would not approve of me speaking about. Yes, vigorously stroking a cat. Beat Saber is an amazing example of a game that's easy to learn but devilishly hard to master. It's just like, and I cannot believe I'm about to make this comparison, the Dark Souls of rhythm games, although it does share this title with Pistol Whip. If you're looking for a reason to buy a Quest or any VR headset as a whole, then this should be it. Not to mention, seeing as the game is developed and owned by Meta, it runs amazingly on the Quest 3. In fact, all the footage that you've been watching has been entirely recorded on the headset. Now, there's too much positivity going on. It's time to talk about a game that I really didn't like. Alright, so when I say really didn't like, I wouldn't say my hate for this game is that bad. I remember when Boneworks first released and it looked like the coolest game ever. When the first trailer dropped, I was completely hooked. The music was on point with the absolute banger that is House of Monogon playing in the background, the gunplay looked amazing, and the physics engine based enemies looked like they'd be great fun to play around with. But actually playing Boneworks? Oh man, it's rough. I get that in the grand scheme of things, this is quite an early VR title, and an experimental one at that. Coming out in 2019, it was a game that was supposed to be groundbreaking and cutting edge, but the thing about the cutting edge is that it's very easy to fall off. First off, I do want to praise the game a little. The gunplay is absolutely top notch. All of the guns feel amazing. Pistols are cool and snappy, the SMGs feel amazing to use, and with the MP5 specifically, you can actually hit the charging handle to reload the gun, which is an awesome detail that makes me feel like a total badass. Other weapons like the assault rifles and the one-handed SMGs like the MP5K are also really fun to use. There's also a dizzying amount of melee weapons, light blunt weapons, heavy blunts, small sharp weapons, medium sharp weapons, heavy sharp, and whatever the hell this thing is. They all feel pretty good. However, when it comes to firearms, there isn't the same amount of variety in the firearms compared to the melee weapons. I mean, there's 2 pistols, a Glock and a 1911, 2 SMGs, 2 assault rifles, no shotguns, LMGs, or explosive-based weapons. If I am being honest, it would have been so cool if I could dual-wield rocket launchers, because that would be both stupid and totally fucking awesome. Now for some negativity. The story is a nice target. It's, well, present for the most part, and that's all the praise I can really give. You play as Arthur Ford, a security officer for Monogon who jacks into MythOS, a virtual city that's currently in development. However, something or someone is messing with the code, I think, spawning rigid bodies and exterminators to shoot at you. If you look deeper, you'll find out about void energy, void waves, rival companies trying to steal Monogon technologies, and ties to Stress Level Zero's other game, Duck Season. Yes, same dev team. And for some reason, there's an entire section towards the end of the game where you end up in like a medieval fantasy setting. What the bloody hell is going on? The last few levels of the game are a total mess, by the way, and the ending to the game left me with a profound sense of, is that it? The level design doesn't really help this. They're oddly basic and have quite shonky platforming sections. Because you have a physical body that can collide with objects in the world, it leads to difficulty doing certain activities, including but not limited to jumping, climbing ladders and ducking under things. You know, something that you have to do throughout the entire bloody game. I'm a big believer that you don't need bodies in VR games to be immersive. Half-Life Alyx is a great example. In Alyx you have just hands and the game is peak fiction. To me, Boneworks feels less like an action-adventure game and more like a linear physics playground that has a story sprinkled in there. It reminds me a lot of Half-Life 2. Both games have a lot of experimentation into the genre that they identify with. In fact, the large amount of physics-based puzzles in Boneworks remind me a lot of early Source Engine games. Now, whilst I didn't like the story too much, I did like some of the side content. As a part of an update, there was a zombie survival mode added to the game. Now, this game mode is extremely fun. There are a lot of different game modes in the zombie game mode, such as survival, which is just your basic COD zombies type thing. There's also lockout, where you have to unlock doors to get to new areas of the map, and a few others that I haven't actually played yet. And yes, I know it's basically just Call of Duty zombies, but as Infinity Ward has proved, it's rather easy to bugger up the formula of shoot zombie and they die. Overall, Boneworks is kind of hard to recommend when better VR games exist, but if you want a moddable physics playground, then this should fill that niche. But even then, the sequel Bone Lab exists and is probably easier to mod, so yeah, can't recommend. And now it's time for a VR classic. If you're around on YouTube in around 2016, you'll probably remember a game by the name of Job Simulator. It's a classic VR game, developed by Austin-based dev team Alchemy Labs. Alchemy, but like spelled alchemy. I can't speak English. And to me, this is one of the very first viral VR games. I remember that every YouTuber and their mother was playing this game, and it's easy to see why. With its really pronounced art style, great sense of humour, and being divided into simple, bite-sized simulations, made it the perfect game for someone to be introduced into VR. The premise of Job Simulator is that you are a human in the year 2050, experiencing quote-unquote accurate simulations of different jobs, which there are 4 of: office worker, gourmet chef, auto mechanic, and store clerk. Sure, the game is pretty short, but this was still in that era of VR when developers were making experiences rather than proper games. But all things considered, I think this is one of the very few early VR games that has actually aged well. The gameplay involves a lot of grabbing things and then using said grab things to complete simple tasks. Of course, each of these tasks are themed to each of the different job types. Now let's give a basic overview of what each job is. Office worker is by far my favourite. You get to do a lot here. Do a presentation, commit tax fraud, throw stuff at your co-workers. It's great fun. You do a mixture of tasks, from typing up a thank you note to the aforementioned tax fraud. The thing I like about this job is the amount of different knickknacks and random little interactable bits. You can make your Newton cradle break the laws of physics if you want to, or play with this little job bot toy, which I really honestly wish was a real thing, and I might actually make one out of cardboard for my desk. Would any of you be interested in seeing that? I might make that a second channel video. Anyway, gourmet chef is probably my least favourite. Granted, it's not bad by any means, none of the jobs are, but I feel like this one is the least fleshed out. It by far has the least amount of interactable bits. Even the auto mechanic has more stuff to do, and most of the interactable bits are on a wall. Plus, being a chef is quite a hard job to make interesting. I mean, if Kitchen Nightmares is anything to go by, then
like, I'd expect her to sear a beef in it.
This job is fucking manic. The tasks in this often involve making various foods for different clients. Now this is probably part of the reason why I don't like it. Each of the tasks seems to blur together into one big amorphous mass. It's a shame, but like I said, it's kind of hard to make this job interesting due to the aforementioned salmon punching. Moving on. Auto mechanic is probably the second worst. The tier list looks something like this. The auto mechanic is quite detailed, and there's a lot of different things you can interact with, hold, and then subsequently throw out job bot. This job mostly involves scamming people out of thousands of dollars, like, holy shit. The cool thing is about this is that the car engines have individual parts that you can then pull out and then not put back in. Gotta make sure the customers come back for more work. Get scammed, idiot! Finally, there is the store clerk, which is probably my second favourite. The environment is richly detailed, and JobBot is in convenient object throwing distance. There's a lot of variety in the tasks, everything from assembling a display case to scanning items to giving a miner a sugar rush. Okay, that sounds really weird now that I've said it out loud. Overall, Job Simulator is a really good game, and I'd highly recommend that anyone who hasn't played it go and play it immediately. It's on Steam, but it was also recently ported to the Quest store, so you can play it without needing a PC. There's even a sequel called Vacation Simulator, which I haven't played, but from what I've seen looks pretty cool. If you're hankering for more Job Sim brand humour, then you can't do much better. I was originally going to save this gem for last, but quite frankly, I cannot wait that long. You know it, you love it, it's... my current favourite VR game. Released by Valve in 2020, I'm completely sure that this was the reason why many people survived that bloody lockdown we all went through. Half-Life Alyx is a beautifully detailed game, with tons of little knickknacks and interactable bits here and there that you can play around with. There's also some extremely impressive environments that really show the power of the Source 2 engine, whilst also making my PC sound like it was about to take off. But can you really blame it? This is running on the lowest settings humanly possible because fuck AMD, and it still looks stunning. The texture work is extremely impressive to the point where it maxed out my VRAM, and other aspects such as lighting and animation are hard-stoppingly good. Watching the Striders walk across the roof of people's houses was honestly incredible, and just goes to show how big those bloody things are. And this cat is disturbingly well animated for what in the grand scheme of things is a tiny detail. Yes, Barney, this is what happened to that cat. The story is just as good as the graphics. You play as Alex Vance, a fighter for the human resistance. This story is set 5 years before the events of the previously mentioned Half-Life 2, so there's no Gordon in this game. Well, not until right at the end anyway. The first half of this story involves Alex trying to rescue her dad Eli from the clutches of the Combine, that evil alien race that I mentioned about 10 minutes ago in the Half-Life 2 section. After rescuing Eli, the rest of the game is dedicated to getting to the vault. Once Eli has been rescued, it's revealed that he stole some kind of Combine data core that shows that the vault is hiding some kind of weapon with world-threatening power. I don't want to go into more detail because that could risk spoiling some excellent plot twists, but the game does start pissing around with the established canon and actually ends up retconning certain events, so sorry Half-Life fans, it's time to start a VR fund, or at the very least a swear jar, because I know how you people react to AWP users in Counter-Strike. The gameplay of Half-Life Alyx mostly involves shooting a variety of enemies, from alien fauna such as headcrabs and poisonous headcrabs and the poor saps that they're attached to Combine enemies such as the basic soldiers, shotgun and machine gunners, which, coming from someone who beat the game on the hardest difficulty on their first try, fuck the shotgunners, they are awful. The shooting is often broken up by simple puzzles that often involve redirecting power streams using Alyx's multi-tool, which has near sonic screwdriver levels of plot convenient uses. The weapons in Half-Life Alyx are all unique in the sense that they're all one-handed, which eliminates the problem that I have with bonework of me being unable to use my limbs correctly. God damn it! They're also quite easy to load, some of them not even requiring a slide to be pulled back in order to chamber them. There's only 3 weapons in the game: a basic pistol, which will be your workhorse for the majority of the game, a shotgun that feels so good to use it's actually a little bit disturbing, and an SMG that may as well be spitting kidney stones at the enemies for how much damage it does. You can collect these little blue discs called resin, which can be used to upgrade your weapons, with extra ammo, reflex sights, there's even a 3-round burst upgrade for the pistol. Whilst I didn't manage to max out any of my weapons, I just needed to search for more resin. I felt like all the upgrades I used had their place in the arsenal and none of them seemed useless, which is a point towards the game's balancing. There are also grenades, but due to my tiny VR play space, I barely use them because I don't want to abuse my lampshade, desk or VR controllers any more than I already have. I've owned this thing for a little under a month and they're already scuffed to shit. Also, this is the only Source game to my knowledge that can actually do ladders correctly, you can either climb up them manually, teleport up them, or grab them, start climbing, get bored and teleport up them anyway. Thanks Valve, you managed to suss out this whole ladder thing. Overall, Half-Life Alyx is a beautifully looking, beautifully playing gem of a VR game. It was one of the first full-length AAA VR games that actually made my jaw drop with how sodding beautiful it was. Oh my lord, the god rays! If you own a VR headset and haven't played this, go and do it, and you might actually not need a PC soon to run the game, seeing as the Valve Decode might be releasing later this year, which personally, I'm hyped as hell for that. Anyway, moving on. As a fan of the Metro series ever since I played Metro 2033 as part of the Redux collection, I was super hyped to find out that this game had a port to the Quest 3. I did try and run Metro Awakening on my PC, but it didn't really play nice, so Quest it is. First off, I want to praise this port. The Quest 3 only has 8GB of onboard RAM, and this is a demanding game on PC. The developers have clearly done some optimization magic in order to get the game to run well. The frame rate is buttery smooth, and throughout my entire playthrough I only had one stutter. Although there is this weird almost shimmering effect when you move your hands or objects in the world. I'm not sure how well this will translate into the recording, but I thought I'd mention it nonetheless. Metro Awakening is a first-person, story-driven shooter with an emphasis on resource management. It follows in the steps of previous games in the Metro series, but does away with certain aspects of those games to make the port over to VR a little bit easier. One such thing that was removed are any sections set on the surface, which is probably a good thing, as being picked up and tossed around by one of those flying buggers would turn my headset from white to chunky beige. Metro fans will be happy to hear that the Kalash returns in full force and is very satisfying to use, although the default pistol is an auto-loading Tokarev instead of a revolver, but I suspect this is one of those concessions that was made to make the transition to VR a bit more reasonable. There's also no rotary shotgun. Well, if there is, I never saw it, and its lack of inclusion confuses me, as on the loading screen the protagonist is very clearly holding the rotary shotgun. There's even sections set inside radiation hotspots down in the Metro, where you'll need to use a gas mask to get through. You even need to wipe away condensation and blood off the visor in order to see. The gameplay is the same as other Metro games. Most of it is running and gunning whilst monitoring what little ammo, grenades and medkits you have to hand. There's a heavy emphasis on thinking your way out of the situation rather than shooting your way out, and there's even a basic line of sight stealth system where you can bonk enemies on the head with the Tokarev in order to knock them out, providing a silent way to progress through enemy territory. The levels also have plenty of twists and turns and little sides that allow the player more opportunity to gather more weapons and resources to make the game just that little bit easier. The dev team have pulled off the transition to VR masterfully. I was actually shocked to find out that it wasn't developed by A4 Games like the other Metro games. It's a different team this time called Vertigo Games, and quite frankly, well done lads, you've pulled off the transition to VR amazingly. The story is the standard Metro affair. Most of it involves searching for the protagonist Sada's wife, who keeps hearing the voice of their dead son. The story takes you through all areas of the Metro with plenty of baddies to shoot, rats to make you shit your pants, and the occasional puzzle. There are some really effective sequences where the ghosts of the Metro are messing with the protagonist, causing Cedar to hear things and question his sanity. Seeing as this is set before Metro 2033, there's no Artyom or any mention of the Dark Ones, but if you're a fan of the Metro series, this story will be an extremely satisfying experience. There are a couple of niggles here and there unfortunately. I had a mild issue with enemies seeing me in the dark sometimes, but that's nothing that a 9mm bullet to the forehead wouldn't fix. I also found that the game showered me with gas mask filters that I never bloody used, so me personally, I would have had longer radiation hotspot sequences to provide the player a higher sense of urgency during those gas mask sections. Overall, Metro VR is a hard recommendation. Fan or not, it's an extremely well made game and a very well balanced one at that. It looks great and is wonderfully optimized. If you haven't played it already, go and play it. It's quite short, but that's not so much of a bad thing. I've long since thought that games definitely need to be shorter because Jesus Christ! Now there are a few other VR games that I've played that I can't really talk about at length, so I'm just going to kind of summarize them here in one sentence. Hard Bullet VR. John Wick Simulator, quite fun, no story, bit shallow. Pistol Whip. Shoot, bang, dead, bang in music, content ID, VR chat. Degeneracy.
Because I have phantom pain!
Phasmophobia. Terrifying. Tactical Assault VR. Like Ready or Not, but not as good. Well, I hope that adequately describes my amazing adventures in virtual reality. I hope to do more VR videos in the future, as this was a really fun video to produce, just a hard one to edit, and record without my PC sounding like it was going to put a gun to its head. What was your favourite VR game that I covered in this video? Also, let me know about any good VR game recommendations that you guys have that you think I should play. Comment, like, and subscribe, follow me on Twitch, Twitter, BlueSky, and Instagram. You can also subscribe to my Patreon if you feel so inclined for behind-the-scenes content, and also a shout-out at the end of the video, and I will see you in the next bit of content, whenever that may be. See you around, guys.